What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. Today's episode will be the 10-minute report on the Seattle Seahawks. If you're unfamiliar, the 10-minute report is where I pick an NFL team and do 20 minutes of research plus my already established knowledge and then record a 10-minute podcast. Thank you in advance for listening. Please make sure you follow me on Spotify. You can also follow me on Instagram at Wedge52Gridiron. Tune into this episode, check out yesterday's episode, and be prepared for tomorrow's episode where I'll be breaking down another team. We will have an episode dropping every day of July. Now to jump into this 10-minute report for the Seattle Seahawks. To start off this episode, we're going to be talking about Geno Smith. Geno Smith last year had himself a year. He went 9-8 as a starter, got the Seattle Seahawks in the playoffs. He was named AP Comeback Player of the Year. He had 30 touchdowns and 4,282 yards. Impressive numbers for Geno Smith, who everyone had kind of written off. Obviously, we know about his writing and or their lack of writing back. He put up, somewhat shocking numbers to the league. I don't think many people were expecting Geno Smith to be, throwing 4,200 plus yards and 30 touchdowns when the Seattle Seahawks named him as a starter last season. But he did. He put the Seattle Seahawks in a good position. They won a lot of ball games. Obviously, he had some help around him. But Geno Smith, shout out Geno Smith for the year that he had last season. To reward him for that, the Seattle Seahawks offered him a contract extension, and he agreed to a 3-year, $105 million extension. This is approximately $35 million a year, approximately. Good bag for Geno Smith. Gets him paid for his efforts. They definitely think by showing this contract, offering him this, they definitely think that Geno Smith can at least, provide similar numbers or at least put their team in a position to win ball games for the next couple of years while they figure out a long-term quarterback situation. Geno Smith was a rookie way back when. I want to say 2013, Geno Smith was a rookie for the Jets. He had not been a starter, at least consistently, since his second year in the league with the Jets. So congratulations to Geno Smith. Keep putting your team in the best position that you can to win. Next, I'm going to talk about the NFL draft for the Seattle Seahawks. I think they had a solid draft. They definitely took a couple of the best players off the board. At least with the picks that they had available, best player available at their position, at their pick. And then they also bolstered up a couple of positional needs to try and, help, round out their roster, which, quite frankly, is not, besides a couple positions, is not really at the top of the league in terms of, roster talent and eye-catching, names like when you look at, the paperwork and on paper, the stats, the names, it's not super shocking, but last year they went 9-8. Stay tuned for the end of this episode. I'll give my prediction on what I think they'll go this season. But with their first pick in the draft, they selected cornerback Devin Witherspoon, a cornerback out of Illinois, who was selected 5th overall. A lot of people didn't really see this one coming, but I personally think it's an excellent pick to pair him up with Tariq Woolen, who last year as a rookie corner started 17 games, had 6 interceptions. That's going to be, a solid duo. We'll look in Witherspoon. If Witherspoon can pan out like predicted by many, that's going to be a very good cornerback duo for the next few years. They're both young. That could really develop into something crazy. They also drafted with their second first-round pick, wide receiver out of Ohio State, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Many people think that he was the number one consensus wide receiver from this previous year's draft. We'll see how that turns out in the league. But this is a scary position group. This is probably I would say the Seahawks' best position group across the board. Pairing up JSN with DK Metcalf, we all know what he can do. Dude puts up incredible numbers, year in and year out, as well as Tyler Lockett, which we all know he's accustomed to, having his ridiculous, 2 or 3 games a season, along with, pretty average good numbers throughout the rest of the games. Now you're going to be talking about getting your newly extended quarterback, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and JSN. Those are very solid offensive weapons for him to be throwing the ball to. And then, obviously, another weapon that the Seattle Seahawks offense has is Kenneth Walker, who many believed could have been Offensive Rookie of the Year for a good portion of last season. In his rookie year, he put up 1,050 yards and 9 touchdowns on the ground. The Seattle Seahawks also drafted a UCLA running back later in the draft, I believe in the second round, to kind of, fill in that spot behind Kenneth Walker. The Seattle Seahawks lost Rashad Penny during the offseason. He went elsewhere. So they kind of just had Kenneth Walker and one other running back on their roster. So I think good pickup, maybe a little early for a running back who's not going to be your starter. But again, they're just quietly trying to round out that roster that was not really eye-appealing or, potentially not even in the top half of the league in terms of on paper, statistics and position groups. So moving on with probably their next strongest position group after wide receiver would be the DBs, corners, safeties. They have Tarek Woolen, who we just talked about, drafted Witherspoon. Then they also have safety Jamal Adams, which you say what you want about Jamal Adams. I don't think he's elite like many people would say at least a couple years ago. They would be saying he's elite. I don't think he's elite. I think he's a good player. Plays the run well, aggressive. And then they also have safety Quandre Diggs, who's a solid safety, and New York Giants safety Julian Love signed with the Seattle Seahawks during this offseason. They have a pretty good, I would say, definitely in the top half of the league in terms of defensive back groups. But their defensive box last year was just horrible. The box being D linemen, defensive ends, linebackers. It was just horrible. Last year, they were the worst run defense last year. But they made some efforts during this offseason so far to kind of address some of those things, hopefully help stop the run, apply a little more pressure, give those DBs out there some help. They reunited Bobby Wagner. They signed Bobby Wagner, a linebacker, who, he's had a great career so far. He's obviously was with the Seattle Seahawks for quite a while before he went to L.A. Then they signed Denver defensive end Draymond Jones, who last year put up 6.5 sacks, 47 tackles. Again, respectable numbers for a defensive end last season. And they also signed Jarron Reed, who I believe he was in Green Bay last season. But he had a stint with the Seahawks as well before I believe he was drafted by them. But last year he had 2.5 sacks, 52 tackles as a defensive end. Again, respectable numbers for, the Seahawks, who are trying to obviously address their defensive box and, try and bolster that up a little bit. They also drafted 2 defensive linemen and an outside linebacker. So the effort is there. I don't think it's elite signings. I don't think it's elite, draft picks. Obviously, it wasn't their first rounders. But, it's just about making small improvements, slowly building up your position groups. And, if you get the right pieces in the right spots, in the right situation, that's when you see teams, really put it together and figure that out. Last year, I would say they have average offensive line, maybe slightly below. They were 10th in sacks last year, and in sacks allowed as a unit. But, at the same time, Geno Smith threw for almost 4,300 yards. Kenneth Walker had 1,000 on the ground. So, average offensive line. They also drafted 2 interior linemen, a center and a guard, to help, try and just build up their unit. So that's wrapping up our 10 minutes on the Seahawks. My record prediction for the Seattle Seahawks in the 2023 season is 11-6. Thank you all for listening. Please make sure you follow the podcast on Spotify. Also, check me out on Instagram at Wedge52Gridiron. Thanks for listening, and go Ravens.